I'm thrilled to have with me Darryl Glover. So welcome, Darryl. I really appreciate you coming today, and we're going to have a conversation about how we together can keep couples out of the adversarial court process.
Perfect.
Darryl is the senior counsel and owner of Glover and Associates. And Darryl is, he's a lawyer, but he prefers not to get into the adversarial court process. So he does not litigate. He won't go to court.
A philosophy about it that is not a very popular one amongst my colleagues, but I'm quite vocal about it. And years ago I used to call it the $10,000 lawyer, now I call it the $20,000 lawyer. And I've said this many times to many people, and I guess I don't make friends in the bar about it. The bar meaning the legal bar. But what they do is, I find this really does happen, is that there's a tolerance, and I call it the $20,000 lawyer, but it's not always 20, it's the tolerance of the client. And what many lawyers do is they will engage the people in a adversarial situation, and they'll gauge their tolerance for fees. And when they see that their tolerance for the fees is starting to wane, and they're starting to get to the point where they're just not so tolerant anymore, a magical solution comes to bear. I have been to the courthouse now and then lately, but I haven't been much for a long time. But if I do go, it's the same people there every time. Well, how is it that I go twice a year, but I see you every time? How is it that it doesn't matter what day of the week, what day of the year I go, the same 10 people are there? They get the same clients calling. The same thing happens. Why is it that theirs always turn into court and mine don't? There's something wrong that happens. I've had occasions where, for instance, we've been engaged by a client, we write a letter over because it's not going to be a settlement meeting right away and it seems very easily settled. So we write a letter over saying, here's some basic understanding of what I understand the clients have already agreed in. So it's not a proposal letter per se. I don't really like doing them too much at the beginning, because I want to make sure this is something that the parties agree to, as opposed to, because I don't want people to get positional. You know, I'd rather, what have you agreed to? Where are you at? We can put that down and we can start talking about that. But I've sent over comprehensive settlement letters that are based on what I understand both the parties want. And I send them over saying, if I've got anything wrong, please tell me what's wrong, we'll talk about it. Tell me which ones I'm right about, which ones I have maybe misunderstood, and let's talk about those issues. And I've actually gone as far as to send those letters over, or send them over after court's been initiated, where a proposal letter is really appropriate. And been to court 3 or 4 times, and on the 4th time, the order is drawn up by the other lawyer, word for word, to my proposal letter. What's wrong with that picture? $20,000 later. Probably 12 for me, 20 for them. So $35,000 worth of RESP is now gone. That should never be gone. And it's and the couple, by the end of it, likes each other less, let's say, by the end of that process. 6 months, 10 months, 12 months later, they're now getting the settlement they should have got the first day, but they hate each other and they're out 35 grand.
So my number one question to you is, how do couples, or how would a person go about finding a lawyer who's not going to spend their time and energy trying to drag them through a nasty, nasty process?
Well, you know, we have an obligation to explain to people what their options are. So if the word court comes up, I wouldn't necessarily run for the hills, but it depends on what the context is. So if a lawyer says, well, here's what we do for an application, and they seem to sort of talk around the idea of court resolutions, then think carefully. We often talk about what would happen. So here's what a judge might say. Here's what the law often says. Here's what, you know, would happen if people in your situation ended up in court. That's very different than, I can get you this, you're entitled to that. If we put an application in, this will happen. It's really important to see what the strategic bent is of the lawyer, and see whether they're looking to generate court or to keep you out of it.
So it's all in the language.
It's
all in the it's all in the perception of yes, we can fight for this, we can get you more, versus what can we do to help you and your family through this difficult time without having to go through that adversarial process.
Correct. And you want somebody that listens to you. You know, there was a day when you went to a doctor and the doctor said, here, take this pill, it'll make you feel better, and you walk out and you get home and your spouse says, what did the doctor say? The doctor said, take this pill. And then says, well, why did the doctor say to take the pill? I don't know, he just told me to take it. Same kind of concept where people now are starting to become more aware, and they need to be, about their own future and their own fate. Now you say to the doctor, well, what's the pill for? Are there any other options instead of the pill? Is there something else I can do instead that's more natural that will help me instead of having to take medication? Same thing with the lawyer's office. Is court really necessary? Well, no. Is this really necessary? Well, what other options do I have? I've heard something about this thing called mediation. Can you tell me about it? And the response that you get is critical. If the response is yes, what we want to do is we want to keep you in the least conflictual method that your situation can tolerate, well, then we have a good match. That's really what you're looking for, somebody that will assist with keeping the conflict down.
Because with conflict also comes a lot of problems for the children.
For sure.
Because there's a lot of fighting between mom and dad. It also comes with a big cost. Yep, because going to court and hiring an adversarial lawyer is going to cost a lot of money. And it comes with a lot of time that people are going to have to stay stuck in their stuff and not be able to proceed to the next stage in their life, because going through the court process is going to take a couple of years
sometimes, yeah, exactly.
Or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I heard from somebody who did a lot of children counseling years ago, and it just stuck with me. He said that, you know, people that stay together for the children have the wrong idea. What's important in determining a child's sort of emotional or health future is not whether the parents are together or not, it's how the parents treat each other in front of them. So if you separate and treat each other with respect because you separated in a way that allowed the relationship to at least stay as strong as it can be, notwithstanding the separation, that is actually the best thing you can do for a child. Not stay together and yell at each other in the house every day.
Yes.
That's not in the benefit of the child. Right. So what you want to do is pick a way of dissolving the relationship that only dissolves the part you have to dissolve. So yes, we're going to separate the property. Yes, we're going to deal with income. Yes, the children are going to live in different households. But do we have to be enemies? Do we have to hate each other? Do we have to speak badly about each other in front of the children? No, absolutely not.
No. Most people, the first thing that they think about when they're going to go through a separation is, I've got to hire a lawyer.
Right.
I'm gonna get this guy, or I'm gonna get this girl. I'm gonna make sure that I'm protected, I'm looked after. So I'm presuming, because I have my own clients and I see some of these behaviors, but I'm presuming when they're coming into your office, they also have that mindset that you're my lawyer, you're going to look after me, you're going to protect me, you're going to get me everything that I need to get, and we're going to fight for it.
Right.
So you don't do that.
No.
So take me through the process of what you would do when a client like that walks into your office.
Well, first, if someone calls our office and says, I'm looking for a pit bull, we tell them to go somewhere else. I don't want a client who wants a pit bull. If someone calls up and says, I'm having challenges and I really need a strong lawyer who can be an advocate for me and support me in some things that are going on, I can handle that. We're not weak. We're just not going to instigate the fight. We're fine to support in a strong way somebody that needs support. That's very different than saying we're going to go in and we're going to tear their heart out. That's not the plan. So one of the things I want to do is I want to have people not committed to the whole process from the get-go. So we often get people that call and they say, I was referred, I'm happy to come in. How much of a retainer do I need to hire Mr. Glover to do my case? And, you know, a lot of them have never been through this before, so they don't really know what that means. They just understand, well, if you're going to hire a lawyer, you have to give them a bunch of money at the beginning. And we don't do that either. So we have people come in. We do charge for consultations. And the reason we do that is because we give 100% in the time that we're together, and we're not looking to upsell them to anything else. If I had them in for free, my mentality might be, I might lean toward the mentality that I need to sell them something else, otherwise I'm going to go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really upfront about it. We charge a modest fee for the consultation. And then at the end of it, sometimes I say, we're good, or they say we're good. You know, we don't need to do anything else right now. Sometimes people come in and they're thinking about separating, but they always call up and say, I'm calling because I'm getting a divorce.
Yeah.
And they're still in the house.
Yes.
They haven't talked to their husband or wife about it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I took a retainer as they walk through the door, they're now more committed to the separation. We're here to help people separate if that's really what they want. We're not here to encourage it. We're not here to facilitate the actual separation. We're here to help them through it and hold their hand during the process if it's really what they want.
Wow. Wow. That's quite different than most lawyers I've...
Let's fill out the court application.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we never want somebody to proceed because they feel committed. You know, I've gone this far, I have to keep going. Well, not really, no. There's other avenues, and if you're not sure that you want to separate, then let's get you a good counselor.
Right.
And let's not go that route yet. And if you need me again, come back and see me. But in the meantime, let's see if we can preserve the relationship if possible.
Right.
And that's one of the things I like about mediation, actually, is that what you want to do, from my view, is you want to preserve as much of the relationship as possible. Mm-hmm. So if you can preserve the whole relationship, people go to counseling, they never get near us. Great, that's awesome. They've managed to work it out. If there's struggles that make them think that the relationship might be over, but there's somewhere down deep a little glimmer of hope, even if they don't realize it, then by meeting with people who are not given to that destiny already, not engaged in that being the reality, and saying, well, no, there's lots of options here, just like there is with every part of this, then if during mediation conversations that happen that say, oh, well, I didn't really realize you felt that way. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to be, when one of the parents says, I want to be a really good parent to our children, and the other one thinks it's all about money, and they talk it through during mediation, then ultimately they might think, oh, yes, she's not a bad dad after all, or she's not a bad mom after all. What was I thinking? And now I actually get where they're coming from. And it may not save the marriage, but if it preserves the respect that the other party has for that person's integrity or their intentions toward parenting the children, that's a home run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it really is.
Because mediation really, I mean, you're bringing them into, for some people, it's the first opportunity that they've had to come into a safe space and kind of air out their concerns and their issues. Some people have never been to counseling before, so the first time that they've actually been able to sit down and talk to each other with the help of a third person, you're right. I mean, I've had some clients that have contacted me a year after they have separated, and we've put a separation agreement together for them so that they could proceed to move on to their own separate lives, that they've contacted me and said, hey, I just want to let you know that we've gotten back together. Right. And if they had have fought through court and been really adversarial and having to find reasons to make the judge side with them, so they're pulling out all these strings and things from their bags, there's a lot of hurt feelings, and I don't know of anybody that has gone through the court process that has had any opportunity of getting back together. Yeah. Now, most people, they don't get back together, and that's fine, but they still have a fairly good relationship so that they can go forward and co-parent their kids in an amicable way. And ultimately, it's best for the kids.
And you make a great point that everybody doesn't engage or believe or are willing to go to counseling. Mm-hmm. So if they get to the point where they're ready to separate and they've not been to any form of counseling at all, that means they've never sat in a room with their spouse and someone else to help them talk things out.
That's right.
And so a mediator can have that role, not with the counseling intention, but as a side effect of mediation that allows people to have a third-party neutral sitting in the room with them so they can say things that maybe they're afraid to say when they're alone because the other person's just going to storm out.
Yeah.
Or
right.
they're going to cry and they're going to feel bad, or they're going to get angry, or they're just not feeling comfortable to say these things, whatever that reason is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's also the way you say things. And so I don't know why every time I bring this up she gets mad or whatever the reaction is. Well, a mediator, just by being a third-party neutral, might say, well, I understand what you're saying. I think maybe the way you're saying it, she's not really hearing you well. But let's try this again, and let's talk about this a little bit more because it's important.
Yes.
And it may not be critical to the value on the NFP or the real brass tack stuff, but it might be critical that that actually is something that they understand about each other.
Right.
Because you're not going to get to a parenting plan until each of them understands their needs as opposed to their positions.
That's right.
And you're able to help them to see the needs.
And you have to walk them through that.
Yes.
So that they know, so they can have that conversation. And a lot of that is, what are my needs, what are your needs, and what are in the best interest of the child.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you get to keep pointing it back to that.
That's right.
Because it's
That's
really
right.
easy to say, I need my time with my child, and this isn't fair
Yes.
to me, and
Yes.
you're doing this to me, and the victim roles, the anger part that goes with it,
Yes.
as opposed to, well, I don't know, what would the kids want? What are we gonna do to create the best life we can for these kids
Right.
or this child? Or,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to switch topics a little bit because I think it's really important to address the issue of independent legal advice, what we call ILA.
Yes.
So independent legal advice is that each party would go and hire a lawyer and have the lawyer look at the separation agreement or what is being discussed through mediation, and just to have somebody as a third voice looking after their interests and making sure that that what they're talking about in mediation or what they've agreed to excuse me, in mediation is one going to be held up in court. It's fair, it's a fair agreement, and you're not really going to have any you're not being pressured to sign an agreement. So you've got all of the information, and you have you're going to pretty much have a solid agreement. Can you talk on the ILA issue, the independent legal advice, and what you do with clients when they come for that information from you?
Well, and one of the things that's important to recognize, and I think you implied it when you were talking, is that it's available at any point in the mediation. So it's not just it's not a rubber stamp when it's all done, but it's available at any stage.
What kind of information would you like a client to bring to you for ILA?
Well, all the finances, of course. You want to know where everything was at date of marriage, date of separation, or if it's a cohabitation, then just the overviews, income verifications. People have different levels of understanding of what each other has. My main thing is making sure they understand. It's not about me proving it. It's that I don't want someone to say, "Oh yeah, I'm sure that's okay." He makes about 60. That doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is have an agreement that everybody thinks is fair, and then they see their spouse driving down the street in a brand new shiny convertible, and they were crying poor all the way through the process. And that's just, again, you've undermined the whole concept of let's do something that's good for everybody.
One of my favorite stories is that we had a very, very amicable couple come to me after 5 years of dealing with their lawyers. They had never been to court. They did not have a separation agreement. 5 years later, and they had spent over $60,000 in legal fees. And by that time, they're now looking for other alternatives. Like, this has gone on so long, and we're amicable, and we have children that we want to raise amicably, and we've spent all of this money and all of this time, and nothing has been done. And they came to us, and we sat in a room, the three of us together, and within 5 days, they had a settlement, and they were happy, and they went on their way. Yeah. And so it's really sad to see that happen. I think mediation needs to be definitely more made aware of, that people don't just think the very first thing that they have to do is run to their lawyer to fight this out in court, or get the best of, you know, I want this and I'm going to make sure that I get it. Because ultimately, I like to tell my clients, ultimately it's not the lawyers that are making your final decision. It's a judge in the courtroom.
Right, absolutely.
And so the lawyers can promise you, or they can guarantee, or, you know, we can get this, or, you know, we're going to fight this out. But ultimately, it's not the lawyer that makes the decision. It's the judge that makes the decision, and everybody loses. It's not just the lawyers. Everybody loses.
And it's unpredictable, because family law is not, it's not a science. It's not it's not exact science. There are laws, there are rules, there are cases, there's all sorts of stuff, but there's too many variables in every case to be able to predict it properly. Yeah. And so you really don't know what's going to happen with what it. So if you want someone else to decide your future, get in front of a judge. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Darryl. I really, really appreciate you coming in today and talking to me about this. I really hope that our viewers will be able to see that there's so many more options out there for them as they're going through their struggle, and it's not all about the lawyers anymore. There's a lot of people out there that can help, and I really appreciate you being one of those lawyers that that we can count on. My pleasure. If I may make a final pitch for mediation and for non-adversarial methods of working together, is people, you know, it's important for everybody, but people with kids especially. Yes. One day there's going to be a wedding, and the question is, are you going to be sitting at opposite ends of the room at your tables glaring at each other, or are you going to be dancing together? Yeah. That's your question. Which way do you want to go when your children get married? Absolutely. And what do they want to see in their parents? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Pleasure.